right, my friends, it is now time for the Soulful Psalms. This is we take part of this. Take a look at the Psalms from the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, and we connect them to your everyday lived experience. And remember, the Soulful Psalms are now its own podcast. You can go to EWTN.com and go to Podcast Central, or listen on the EWTN app, or even on one of your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify or uh, iTunes or SoundCloud, and download and listen to the Soulful Psalms every single day. Today, we're going to conclude our look at Psalm 141. So obviously, this is very close to the end of the Psalms. This one is by David. Again, David is the only writer of the Psalms that has Psalms in all five books of the Psalm. This psalm, again, is typically prayed only once during the 4 week cycle, and that is typically Saturday vigil in week one. So as we're moving into week one, what's called First Vespers or evening prayer one for Saturday for Sunday week one, but the vigil is when this psalm is typically prayed. And the prescript that we've already looked at, because we're going to jump in at verse 6. But the prescript, very simple, a psalm of David, Mizmor David. All right, so let's jump in. We'll see what David has to say to us today, starting at verse 6 in Psalm 141. If they fall into the so just to give some context here. Here, typical David, he starts off calling out to the Lord, imploring the Lord to hear his voice as he cries out to him. He doesn't, he goes, Lord, don't let me cave into those desires that take me away from your love. All right. And so that's kind of how the theme that he's setting here. All right. Then he says in verse 6, if they fall into the hands of if they fall into the merciless hands of their judges, they will grasp how kind are my words. All right. Um, as clods of earth are plowed up on the ground, so their bones were strewn at the mouth of the grave. All right. So David here is talking about. He says previously, if a good man reproves me, corrects me, like fraternal correction, that's actually an act of kindness. But he says, don't let the oil of the wicked anoint my head. Right? Again, don't let me fall into the allure, into um, the desires of those who don't want to follow your law, who don't see their lives as intimately connected with yours, O Lord. And it goes, so if they fall into the merciless hands of their judges, they will grasp how kind are my words. Right? And so once those people who are turned away start to be judged, they will see, wait a minute, this guy was actually trying to help us. So it wasn't just like, he's trying to force his religious beliefs on me. No, he was actually trying to help me. And now they begin to realize what this person was trying to do. And it says that, again, David using the analogy here from nature and from farming and agriculture, as clods of earth are plowed up on the ground. So when you're getting ready to plant, you take that plow and you plow that field. You turn that dirt over. So their bones were strewn at the mouth of the grave. Right? So, they didn't seek God's mercy. They didn't seek God's fidelity. They didn't seek conversion and to turn back toward the Lord. They didn't listen to the words that I was saying, words that were leading them to peace, words that were leading them to deeper and closer relationship with the Lord. And so their bones were strewn at the mouth of the grave. So very interesting. The like clods are plowed up. Their bones are they're thrown around the mouth of the grave. That means that they weren't buried. And one of the precepts was to bury the dead. This was something that we see in the Old Testament, like especially when the Israelites fell in battle, they would take the bodies of their brothers that fell in battle and then bury them back in the land of their fathers. But David is saying here, almost like there's no connection here by their bones being strewn at the mouth of the grave and actually not being buried, that there's a disconnect here, um, uh, and not like a linear relationship. We look at past, present, and future, but David was seeing here there's really no connection to the past here. Because why? There is no relationship with the Lord. So they have, so they're after they die, that the physicalness of their bodies, they don't go down to Sheol, which is like the holding place, right? Waiting for eventually Jesus on Holy Saturday to bring those souls to heaven. They're just, strewn at the mouth of the grave, just like earth that's plowed up from the ground. A little bit of a powerful image there by David. And he says to you now, he says, that's what's going to happen to the people who don't open their hearts to you, Lord. But now he turns back to himself. To you, my eyes are turned, O Lord, my God. Right? In you, I take refuge. Spare my soul. Right? So I love that. But Lord, my eyes are turned toward you. My heart is turned toward you. Remember, because the eyes are the windows to the soul, and the soul is the place is nefesh in Hebrew. Nefesh. The soul is obviously the place where God's glory and God's life abides in you, in the life of the soul. And so the eyes are the windows to the soul. So he wants his eyes always focused on the Lord, so that his soul can be filled with the Lord's Spirit. And he says, and in that confidence, he takes refuge in the Lord. Therefore, spare my soul. Because I take refuge in you, Lord, bring me to a place of salvation. Bring me to a place of conversion. Bring me to a place of healing. Bring me to a place of love. From the trap they have laid for me, keep me safe. Right? Lord, there are people around me that are going to try and take me away from you. But always keep me focused on you, no matter what's going on around me, all the distractions, even the desires within myself to not follow you, as I mentioned before, to fall into the allurement and the attraction of those things of the world. Always keep me focused on you, Lord. Keep me under the shadow of your protection, under the shelter of your wings. Right? It goes from this. Keep from the traps they had laid for me, keep me safe. Keep me from the snares of those who do evil. Because that's one of the ways they would have gone hunting. They set traps for the animals, and the animals would either dig a hole in the ground and cover it with leaves, and the animal would fall through the trap, and they would fall into this hole. They're unable to get out, and that way it was easier to get the prey, instead of having to chase it. But because they didn't have guns and things back then, right? Or they had these kind of metal traps that would trap the leg of the animal, again, preventing it from moving so that it would be easier for them to catch the animal. So David, again, applying these analogies to our life. There are people out there that are going to set snares, and ooh, look at that. That looks like a mouse, right? In a trap. You put a piece of cheese there or a piece of peanut butter or something that's going to attract them. And he's saying, Lord, don't allow me to fall for that trap. Don't allow me to fall for those allurements. Keep me focused on you. And that's great wisdom and great advice from the greatest king in the history of Israel.
And I can also speak from experience. Sometimes we set traps for ourselves. We don't allow ourselves to either have proper accountability, or we're like, well, every time I go down this path, I always end up doing da 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 da. And so we have to also be mindful of our own, because I don't like to give the devil credit for things that I know I'm 100% capable of doing to myself. And I know that I'm the one that can change that. I know that I can focus more on God. I can lean into him and go, Lord, this is an area I struggle with. What can I do? And oftentimes it's replacing a bad habit with a good habit. So it's not just in distancing ourselves from the things that tempt us, but it's also in putting something in place like adoration time, or a playlist, or what is your go-to verses. I used to have a friend that would keep 3x5 cards in his visor. So anytime he was stuck in traffic and he would start to get that road rage would fill in, he'd just pull down his Bible verses and just go through them, He's like, it's a good way to memorize it, but in addition, it would be that go-to verse to help me to just kind of chill. so that he wouldn't allow himself to get into a place that could, whatever. So that the snares of our own flesh can sometimes trip us too.
Yeah, so true. So true. What we have to do is be aware of that. People all the time, they talk about, what are your triggers? Like if you know that you have a propensity for a particular sinful act, what are the triggers? What are the traps that are laid that try to bring you into that, and be aware of those and to avoid them, to avoid those triggers. In fact, if that means cutting yourself off from someone that's going to bring, then you need to do that, at least for a while, right? I love that.
Yeah.
Then the final verse here, let the wicked together fall into their traps, whilst I pursue my way unharmed. Right? So David said, no, don't let me fall into their traps. Let them fall into their own traps so they can begin to see the fallacy of their way of living and their fallacious way of thinking and acting. And maybe that will lead them to conversion while I pursue my way unharmed. I am unharmed, so I can be in a position to show mercy and forgiveness to that person who fell into the trap. In fact, I'm going to be free so I can reach into that trap and pull that person out.
For more on the Soulful Psalms with Deacon Harold Sivers, check out Beacon of Truth weekdays at 4 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio and streaming everywhere you listen to podcasts.